Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to another episode of the Speculation series for the next Three Kingdoms title from Creative Assembly. So last time we talked about why ranged units dominate the campaign meta in Total War games, and how I propose to fix that mechanically by making ammo into a replenishable resource, much like hit points. But today we're going to shift away from the micro aspect of units and battles, and instead talk about how the next Three Kingdoms game can create better faction identity and offer more faction specializations throughout its unit representation. This topic stemmed directly from a comment I read from 2 episodes ago when I first mentioned how the common complaint about Total War 3 Kingdom was the lack of unit diversity. And this comment had a good point in stating that because 95% of the unit roster was shared between all faction, especially at launch, when even the bandits were using the Han roster, the factions themselves ended up feeling less distinct. Certainly, later DLC such as Yellow Turban and the Furious Wild did alleviate this situation, and the bandit rework made them into a distinct subculture as well, with their own roster of units. The core factions of the game still lack clear identity in terms of units. And this comment made me think back to Shogun 2, which also had a large shared roster, not to the degree of Three Kingdoms, but a comparable historical title. In Shogun 2, you went in with a clear unit roster identity, despite this shared roster. Chosokabe specialized in range units, Shimazu specialized in samurai units, Takade with the cavalry, Mori had ships, Usugi had the monks, and Date was charge focus, Hojo was siege weapon focus, and so on. In Three Kingdoms, the faction specialization is less about the units, but more about the mechanics, which was an area that Shogun 2 cared less about, as aside from unit focus, Shogun 2 factions played largely the same. But enough about Shogun 2, as honestly, Three Kingdoms actually had unit specialization. They're just not on the faction, but on characters. For example, if you had Sun Ce in your faction, then your unit specialization immediately becomes cavalry, as the double charge bonus make cavalry godly strong. And the same thing can be said about Liu Bei and militia units, Zanba and mercenary captains, Ma Teng and Ma Chao with Qiang units, and so forth. But this can be improved on, as there are many factions without a clear identity. And some of these characters that do provide a clear identity, the specialization that they do provide are sometimes not historically aligned. So kicking things off with the 3 major factions that will certainly be making a reappearance in the new title, we have the 3 factions representing the 3 kingdoms themselves in Cao Cao for Wei, Liu Bei for Shu, and Sun Jian, Sun Ce, Sun Quan for Wu. Now I'm splitting the 3 rulers of the Sun clan because I believe they should be separate factions with different mechanics and specializations, much like how Sun Jian currently plays differently than Sun Ce. By the same token, Cao Pi and Liu Shan should also get faction-unique mechanics eventually in the new title, should DLC support last a little bit longer this time. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's first fix the current faction specializations. Cao Cao, instead of Sun Ce, should be the cavalry-focused faction. This makes sense from multiple angles, as Cao Cao, who controlled the northern regions of China, had access to the horse pastures and the vassalage of the nomadic tribes that supplied the riders to form his famed tiger and leopard cavalry corps. Sun Quan, who is the best representation for Kingdom of Wu, should be focused on archers, as the naval focus of Wu forced them to train more archers, as it was the definitive naval combat weapon of the time. And other cool minor changes that can be added is that the Wu force typically used shorter sabers, as it was more convenient to use in close quarter combat, given the nature of naval battles with boarding. Liu Bei, on the other hand, can still be militia-focused faction, but hopefully with a unique upgrade path for his militias to become veteran infantry units. Another interesting change that can be brought to the new title is more logical changes for retinue size. For example, Liu Bei should have unique, cheaper, and more numerous militia units compared to other factions. So say instead of 120 units per retinue on large unit size, Liu Bei would field 160 instead for his militias, because his charisma and popular support gives him an easier time to recruit militias. Then the same militia units can gain experience, and as they upgrade to more advanced units with smaller and smaller unit size, symbolizing survivors that had become hardened veterans for Liu Bei, to return back to the 120 units per retinue. Aside from these three major factions, I think most of the minor factions actually do have decent unit identity in the current game. For example, Gong Sun focus on horse archers, Ma Teng focus on qiang units, Dong Zhuo on Xiliang cavalry. Kong Rong's a bit odd, as his crossbow units are entirely fictional, but at least they are clear faction identity. Yuan Shao also has a huge unique unit roster, and his captain mechanic does capture his large army without talented officer situation quite well. Tao Tian's unique units are bad, but then again, being a displaced population-focused free LC faction, you can't ask for too much. Yan Baihu has the stock and poison field down pat, while Zheng Jiang and Zhang Yan do struggle a bit with a clear identity, as both of them rely a lot on ambush attacks or scare tactics with aggressive charges. Liu Bei also has the standard frontline plus archer identity defensive playstyle. So all in all, I feel like the current game does give all the faction a decent identity, unless you're Shi Xie. But hopefully we can see this expanded upon a bit more in the next title, especially if we can see more regional troops that are province-based to help make minor factions more exciting to play, and the introduction of even more characters like Sun Ce, who offer clear playstyle directions the second you acquire them for your whole faction. So that's going to do it for us today, as this episode comes to an end. Now, this series is actually going to go on hiatus for the time being, for two reasons. First, with the launch of the new Three Kingdom title still probably at least a year away, I feel like it's probably best to wait until we get some more news or tease of the new title before resuming this series. It has been awesome to share some of my thoughts about the current game and my hope for the future game here on the channel, especially with all the feedback from all of you. And hopefully CA will also take some of this advice, both mine and yours, to heart when developing the new title. Second, with Victoria 3 coming out next month, I've been planning to start a Century of Humiliation Let's Talk Lore series here on the channel, so I need to get a few things off my plate to free up some time for that project. So going forward, this upload time on Monday will be replaced by a multiplayer mod showcase that I've been working on with Yulia for future tournaments. So hopefully this explains why this series will be put on pause for now, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion enough to hit that like button, and as always, feel free to comment down below to share some of your thoughts about these suggestions, and I will see you all next time. Bye!